Hello, and welcome back to our Introduction of Programming series, where we'll be focusing on Python. And in this video, we'll be looking at arithmetic and data types in Python. So let's get into it. First, we'll begin with data types. So Python has some built-in data types that are already there for you from the get-go, which makes it really easy to pick up and just start writing code. So some data types we have data types for numbers, Boolean values, strings, lists, tuples, and dictionaries. In this video, we'll be focusing on the arithmetic. So we'll look at these data types on a later date, but we'll be looking at numbers particularly. So in Python, you actually do not need to declare your data type when you declare a variable. So in a lot of languages, you have to basically declare what you want the data type to be. Like if you want it to be an integer, you have to specifically say int x equals 5. But in Python, that's not the case. So x equals 5, and then after that, you can immediately set your x again to, say, a Boolean value. We'll make it true. And Booleans are just true or false. Pretty simple. We can then even make it a string. We can say x equals hello. So we can change that to anything we want, basically. So we'll be mainly looking at integers and floating point numbers. So what is an integer and what is a floating point number or a float? So an integer, like in standard mathematics, is just a number without a decimal part. So again, like standard integers like 1, 2, 3, all the way up to whatever you would like. Floating point numbers have a decimal part. So it could be 1.2, 2.5, 3.6667. We could have 1.0 even. These are actually two different variables. It's not the same. So let's look at some arithmetic with these variables. So we have a couple important arithmetic operations. So we have the standard quotient, where we have x divided by y, the quotient of x and y. We have a floored quotient. This is division, and this is integer division. So the result of this division is going to be an integer. And then we have the modulus, or the remainder. So let's do a couple operations. First, we'll do 2 divided by the quotient. We'll say 3. What is this going to be? So Python is going to return to us the result of 0.666 repeating. And this is going to be a floating point number because it has a decimal part. But if we do this same operation with integer division rounds to negative infinity. So it's going to be 0. This rounding to negative infinity can lead to some interesting edge cases, because then we get to the point where an interesting example is -1 integer division 2. What would you think this would be? In standard division, we'd get -0.5. So integer division rounds this value to -1 because it always rounds to negative infinity. So whichever number is more negative, it must round down. In this case, we could either round to 0 or we round to -1. Since we want to round to the lesser value, we round to -1. Now let's see some more operations. 15 divided by 5 equals 3.0. Pretty standard. 15 and the integer division, 5, is just 3. No decimal part. This is a floating point number. This gives a result. Float. This gives a result as an integer. Now let's look at something interesting. The modulus or remainder. If we take 10 mod 3, what would you think Python would return? So Python is just returning the remainder. What is left over when you divide by 3. So we have 10, and then if we want to put 3, if we want to make 10 with 3, then it's just 3 times 3. That's the closest we could get. So it is 3 times 3 plus 1. And the 1 remainder is going to be what Python returns as the modulus, 1. If we do a number, say n variable, divided by 2, and then this will tell us if something is even or odd. If the remainder when you divide by 1 is 0, that tells us the number is even. If the remainder when you divide by 2 is 1, that tells us the number is odd. So there's also an order of operations in Python, and we have some more operations that it has to follow. And so in order of precedence, this is how it proceeds. So first we have our parentheses, then set number 1 spot. Second in order, we have our exponents or exponentiation. Third, we have our unary operators, x plus x and negative x. We have fourth, our regular multiplication and division. So this is kind of the same order as BEDMAS or PEMDAS. And then fifth, we have our regular plus and minus. So we know that whichever of these we see, we have to perform the operations in order. So we always do the parentheses before the exponentiation or before the addition. So if we look at a problem, then we'll see. So we have, let's do -2 plus 3 mod 2, and then we'll do plus 4. So first we see our parentheses. We work inside here. Again, parentheses. If we evaluate this, it's just -2. Now we go on to evaluate these. And 3 modulus 2, the remainder of 3, when you divide by 2, is just 1. So we can just replace this with 1. So now we have evaluated this as -2 plus 1. And then we can add 4. So if we evaluate this, this is just -1. And then we have plus 4. And then this is just 3. Now if we did 4 integer division with 2, and then exponentiation 2. So first we look inside the brackets, and for the integer result would be 2, and then exponentiation with 2. So this is basically, if we want to rewrite this in mathematical form, it's just 2 to the 2, and that is just equal to 4. So this was just some basic arithmetic and data types that we can use to start building small programs in Python, and in our later videos we'll get more in depth and start building even more complicated applications.